Hi, and welcome to the Blue Mouse Knits. Today I'm going to teach you how to bind off in pattern, and this works for any stitch that is a combination of knits and purls. And it's especially important for stitches like seed stitch, which is what I'm going to show you today. So when binding off in seed stitch, you're going to work the stitches as you would if you weren't binding off. So if you look at the stitch below, if it's a purl bump, you'll be knitting that stitch. And if it's a knit stitch, you'll be purling it. So we're going to work across in pattern like we normally would for seed stitch, but we're going to bind off as we do it. And I'll show you how to do that. So my first stitch looks like a purl bump, so I'm going to knit it. And my second one looks like a knit stitch, so I'm going to purl that. So you're going to go into that first stitch as if to knit, and knit it. And then you're going to purl that second stitch because remember, it looks like a knit stitch. So bring your yarn to the front and purl it. And now, very similarly to the standard knit bind off, you're going to take this first stitch on your right hand needle and pass it over this other stitch and off the needle. So you might find it helpful to place your index finger on this second stitch here so that you can pull the first over and off without accidentally slipping that one. So go into this first stitch and pick up that front loop, and you're going to pass it over and off of this other stitch. So slide it down to the tip of the needle and be careful not to drop the other one. Pull it over and off. And you have just bound off one stitch. So then we're going to work one more stitch from the left needle in pattern. So you can see that this next stitch has a purl bump. So we're going to knit it, because in seed stitch you always work the opposite of what you see. So I see a purl stitch and I'm going to work a knit stitch. Go into it as if to knit, yarn over and work that knit stitch. And then we're just going to repeat that bind off step where you take your first stitch on your right hand needle and pass it over and off this other stitch. So place your index finger on that closest stitch to the edge so that it doesn't move. And then go into that first one and pull it over and off, being careful not to slip the other one off. And there you have it, you've bound off your second stitch. So you just keep going in pattern. So my next stitch looks like a knit stitch, so I'm going to do the opposite and purl it. So bring my yarn to the front and purl it. And now I'm going to bind off again. So I'm going to take the first stitch and pull it over the second stitch. So remember to place your index finger on the closest stitch to the edge so that you don't accidentally slip that one off. Go into the first, into the front loop, and pull it to the end of the needle and slip it off. So you go up and over that other stitch and off. So you just keep doing that across the needle. And now I refer to this one as the first one and this one as the second, because when I'm looking at it as one full row, this was the first one I did, and this was the one that I just did, which is our second. So we're going to pass the first over the second, go into it, into that front loop, hold that other one, pass it over and off. And you just keep doing that. And when you get to the end, you just work that last stitch as it needs to be worked. And then you're going to do just that one final bind off. So go into this first stitch and pass it over the second. Go into the first, pass it over and off. So then you just have one final stitch, and you can just pull it up with your needle to create a little bit of a loop. And then you're going to want to cut a tail long enough to weave in later. And then you can just pull that tail through the loop to create a nice closed edge. Looks like a nice, neat knit edge at the top. So there you have it. That is how you bind off in pattern in seed stitch. Now the same thing applies for pretty much any stitch pattern. If you're working in rib, you would just continue to work the stitches as they appear. So knit the knit stitches and purl the purl stitches. And if you're working in moss stitch, you do the exact same thing that you do in seed stitch. So you would work whatever the next row would be, but bind off as you go. And if you want more videos like this, please like this video and subscribe for more.